Thank you, Ms. Armacost. So this concludes the presentations portion of our session. Anyone who's interested to pose a question or make a comment to our speakers and panelists may do so by writing on the sheets of paper found in your registration bags. Please pass over the papers to the center, and a volunteer will collect them and bring them to the stage. And meanwhile, while we're waiting for the questions to come forward to us, I would like to pose a question to the panel. We know that the largest segment of the world's poor do live in rural areas and mostly earn their income from agriculture. So what types of financial services or a combination of financial services you believe may have, or if we have any information or documentation on this, have the largest impact on helping those people rise above the $1.25 day threshold? And what role does clean energy can clean energy play in moving people above this threshold and maybe perhaps even beyond poverty income to other above poverty in general? So
yeah, it's on now. I'm sorry, your question was what kind of in terms of that?
Do you want it? Okay.
Well, in answer to your question, what I think we need to think about is a package of services, a suite of service. I don't think it's going to be one product, and I think that we need to refine the way we think about products. So the way I think about it is loans for income generating, for improving household quality of life, loans to promote energy efficiency, targeted savings products, targeted remittances products, micro leasing products. All of those things are going to play a role, and I think it's really important to think about all of them and not be too loan centric in the process.
And maybe
Alex, please.
Maybe if I could just add, I think that to go to one of the points that Dr. Bakshi raised, I think if we thought that lending to enterprises, off-farm enterprises, was complex and in needing us to have diversified and flexible loan products and financial products, that lending in the agricultural sphere is even more complex, and it is not a homogeneous group by any means. And so some of the innovations around the kind of Grameen 2 and the more flexible loan products, we're going to need to be ready to, if we want to do it well, to not have a mono product type of approach. And also, I think that pairing the finance with the access to timely information, because with a crop, you can lose an awful lot very fast if you don't have access to the kind of information you need to respond to a blight or some sort of a disease. And it's much more vulnerable, I think, in a lot of ways than other types of non-agriculture-based businesses.
I would only like to add one more thing. When you have small holdings like Abed mentions, half an acre holding, and in a limited geographical area, believe me, most of the farmers would be cultivating almost the same crop. So if it's a heavy rainfall area, perhaps all of them are growing rice. So the issue is not how to finance rice. The issue is also not that we need to get afraid that if a crop fails, all of them will fail, and therefore, if there are 100 farmers, in order to reduce our risk, we'll finance only 10 and leave 90. No, we'll have to learn to finance all 100 and take that risk. The issue moves from there, as I said, when you try to move the production function, when you want them to improve the quality of their agriculture practices. Now, with holdings of this small size, almost none of them will be able to own any kind of agricultural equipment, without which you can't improve productivity. So group mode is required not only just to ensure financing, group mode will be required for owning equipments. And financing equipments in a group mode is a totally different ball game from financing individuals in a group mode. So we'll have to learn to finance and design new types of agricultural lending products.
I think going back to your question about the products, I think it's important to recognize what Professor Gonzalez said, the fact that it's not homogeneous, it's very heterogeneous, right? And in terms of the agricultural products, in BRAC's experience, what we found was that we had some agricultural products that didn't work before. And the reason why they didn't work before is because they were too structured. They weren't flexible enough. And about 3 years ago, we started a tenant farmer program where the product was very specifically designed for a group of farmers with flexible repayment rates. Actually, most of the repayment happened after harvest. And over the last 3 years, we've seen very good success with that product. So I think going back and I mean, there are, like you said, there are lots of different types of crops. There are different seasons, different cycles, and it's probably important to take that into account and not have sort of one-size-fits-all sort of products.
So staying on that, okay, Professor, yes.
Yes. Farmers have to address three types of challenges. A much longer duration of their cycle of production, the need for investments for technological change that go above their regular savings possibilities, and to address risk that comes from a number of events that are beyond their control. And they need financial services to address each one of these. They need credit that is tailored to the biological cycles of their production, which is different from the regular microcredit that we know. And in order to manage risk, they need a combination of savings, which is their precautionary reserve, and insurance. And here, for events that are catastrophic, systemic, that affect all farmers at the same time, the most promising innovation, even though it is only being tested right now, is index insurance. Finally, I would like to say that what the farmer is looking for is a relationship. It's not a particular product or even a particular combination of products, but a relationship with a source of financial services that evolve over time, evolve with the farmer, and respond to the particular circumstances that he might be facing in each moment of time.
Thank you, Professor. So here's one challenging question from the audience. So they're asking, mitigating climate change is not only a responsibility of developing countries. So how is the microfinance sector within industrialized countries working to face this? So.
The answer literally to that is I don't know, and I think that here we go. I think the microfinance sector in industrialized countries are dealing with some fairly basic issues of scale and efficiency, and that's probably the right focus for now. I think, and as I mentioned in the paper, I think we have to realize that the lion's share of the blame for climate change and the lion's share of the ways to address it is coming from the industrialized countries, and that needs to be, we need political will that goes way, way beyond microfinance programs there and deals with some realism about the industrial processes that we've adopted and how they affect the world and how they're going to affect the poor. I think that at the same time, to enable the poor in ways that benefit them right now and also address climate change for the world will be a kind of example that perhaps can create the political will in the industrialized countries, because you can see how people are taking risks, changing production practices, and doing what is ultimately a fairly small part in the medium term, and perhaps that can help create the motivation for those who can do the biggest part to do what they need to and must do.
Thank you. So there's also a few questions from the audience for Mr. Abid. First, what is BRAC's position on genetic modification of seeds? And how does BRAC, or what's your experience with paying for agricultural training and support to micro entrepreneurs? And there's a question on is the project in Uganda sustainable? I'm not sure if you know about it.
Well, let me begin by saying I'm not an agriculture expert, but on GM, the first question was what's BRAC's take on genetically modified I think first thing to say is that there's a big difference between hybrid and GM. We've done some work with hybrid high-yielding seeds, but that's not necessarily GM seeds. So firstly, let's realize that. So when I was talking about high-yielding varieties of rice seeds, it's not genetically modified. Second question was about how do we finance our agricultural training in terms of the agricultural value chains. Yeah, that's been through the surpluses that we've received from our agricultural financing schemes. We now have a central bank line of credit for agricultural financing, which is a low-cost credit, and we've been also providing training and input with surpluses generated from that scheme. And thirdly, is the program in Uganda sustainable? I actually have no idea. So I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
That information should be available on brat.net, however, so we can look that up.
Okay, and to that effect, we've also had a request for providing website addresses and available resources for implementation of services and products that can protect the environment. So maybe after the session, our panelists can help with that as well. Another question we have from the audience is that it's a little bit long. In South Asia, women today are the largest number of subsistence farmers, farming on small, marginal, rain-fed land without ownership or control over assets such as land and irrigation. So how can microfinance help women gain control of such critical assets in the first place?
Well, whether it is women or men, if they don't have titles to the land, and this is becoming quite common because as holdings become smaller and smaller, remaining glued to that holding is not becoming viable for almost anybody. So whether one likes or not, agriculture increasingly in Asian countries is being done on kind of tenant farming basis. And it is here that we need to learn that the best security for agriculture lending is not perhaps mortgaging the land, but the prospective income that one can get from cultivation. This is what we do in the Indian banking scene, and I must mention to you that Indian banks provide agriculture loans to more than 50 million farmers every year, aggregating more than 68 billion euros. And the entire thing is non-collateralized. It always depends only on the prospective income, and that is why provision of appropriate technology which can kind of guarantee a certain minimum level of income is extremely important. So one looks at what income can be generated from agriculture rather than trying to look at collaterals.
If I could just add, I think it depends on who owns the land, whether it's the husband, the relatives, it's the government. But I do think the lesson of Grameen Bank, where in order to get a housing loan, the title of the land that the house is built on needs to be transferred to the woman, probably has some applications in this context. Where it's an example, though, of the title to the land is really something that should be transferred from potentially the government to those who farm it. I think that the concept of accompaniment of clients that I've learned so much about from Foncosé, where they can play an advocacy role in trying to stand by their clients and not have that be a barrier to borrowing or success, but actually try to convince people to do the right thing and put them in an ownership position. And frankly, if MFIs can play targeted advocacy roles with the clients, maybe the clients will play more of an advocacy role for the MFIs when they get into trouble.
Thank you. So we got another request from the audience, someone from Guinea, asking how can we create a partnership between your institutions and our MFIs. So I think I would like to ask anyone from the audience interested with specific questions for the panel to come up on stage following this session. So a question to Mr. Bakshi. You seem to have said that grid power seems to be the best long-term answer to energy poverty, and solar power is only an interim solution. So can grid power truly be offered in a way that does not hurt the environment and does not worsen climate change, in your opinion?
As Alex said, climate change is a much wider issue which goes beyond certain small lighting systems or heating systems that we can create in rural areas. But the fact remains that we need to look at long-term solutions. And long-term solutions, so far as power is concerned, is grid power. How it will be provided is a huge issue for us in India also. Because there would be small habitats where grid power will never reach. And we will have to find alternatives. And maybe somewhere we'll have to depend on such power being subsidized by the state, because ultimately I think infrastructure creation is primarily the responsibilities of the state and not of microfinance institutions.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, I'm actually the chair of the Finance and Investment Committee of the UN Year of Sustainable Energy, and one of the issues that's come up is the idea of leapfrogging some of the traditional ways that that things we consider to be basic, like power, are handled moving forward. So there's a whole group that's looking at mini-grids, because it's actually very, very inefficient and incredibly costly for governments to try and extend the grid into certain places where really it's impossible. You're either up high mountains or you're in impenetrable areas, and creating mini-grid solutions that may be solar but may be related to other things are really important strategies for governments to take into account, because they can save huge amounts of money, and there are very entrepreneurial people that can make these solutions happen quickly, which has to be good politically for the government. If they're providing power in places where it wasn't before, that has to be a good thing at the end of the day.
Thank you. So with that, I think time's up. So I'd like to thank all the delegates who submitted questions today, and our sincere appreciation for the authors and panelists for this useful and engaging discussion. Now I'd like to ask Sam to make a few announcements before we adjourn.
Thank you, Rania. Thank you to our panel. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluations forms. Don't forget the prizes for those who complete it and turn it in. If you're leaving Valladolid before tomorrow's closing ceremony, please leave your evaluation form in the box at the registration area. Directly after this session, there'll be a short break, and after the break, there'll be a round of associated sessions. We'll start them 20 minutes later than scheduled. Please check your program book for titles and room assignments. Don't forget, tomorrow, it might be by closing ceremony, a CD of all the workshops and plenaries, audio, will be available for €10 at the registration desk. The day-long courses start tomorrow at 9 in the morning. The closing session will be at 1700. Let me turn it back over to our chair to adjourn this session.
Thank you, Sam. One last thank you to all the delegates who have been with us here, for the presenters, speakers, and panelists. And I call this session adjourned. So thank you.